Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so excited to have you guys here. Thank you for spending your Thursday with us. My name is McKaylee. I work with Tattered Cover Bookstore, and I am excited to be sharing this event with you all. It's going to be a great time. We're learning about a wonderful new book called Ragweed and Poppy. Just a couple of things about Tattered Cover before we get started. We just want to let you know that 3 of the 4 stores that we have, our Aspen Grove location, Colfax Avenue, and Union Station, are now open to the public. We are requiring masks upon entry. And additionally, we are offering disposable gloves to customers who may want to use those when touching the merchandise and browsing. The stores are open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can get specifics on the dates on our website. Also on our website, if for some reason you can't come into the store, or you still don't feel comfortable, you have every right. And our website's still open now 24/7. You can order books online and support a local independent bookstore that way. Closed captioning is enabled for those who might need it on this video. So feel free to turn those on if you need it. Additionally, this video will be available on our YouTube channel at this link afterwards in case you miss it, or you missed the beginning, or you need to leave early. Don't worry, you can watch the rest of it. Not a problem there. I'm really, really excited about this book, Ragweed and Poppy. It is wonderful. We're going to talk all about it with the author and illustrator today. Avi is the author. He is the award-winning author of more than 82 books for young readers, ranging from animal fantasy to gripping historical fiction, picture books to young adults. And The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle and Nothing But the Truth were awarded Newbery Honors, and Crispin won the Newbery Medal. He's also the author of the popular Poppy series. Avi lives in Colorado. And then we have Brian Floca, who is the illustrator. He's, in addition to being the illustrator of the books in Avi's Poppy story series, he's the author and illustrator of acclaimed picture books, Locomotive, winner of the Caldecott Medal, Moonshot, The Flight of Apollo, Lightship, The Race Car Alphabet, and 5 Trucks. He resides in New York. And I'm gonna have Avi and Brian join me now. We're gonna just turn on their mics and their videos. Here we go. One thing at a time here. And then we have Brian. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi there.
Hi there, Brian.
Hi there, Avi. Hi there, Michaela.
Hello. So I thank you both for joining us this afternoon. We're so excited to talk about Ragweed and Poppy.
Well, we're delighted to be here, and even more delighted that we put this book together.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Because there's a really special anniversary coming up with this series. I'd love to know about how it started. Do you want to start there, Avi?
Well, believe it or not, Brian and I have been working, I think it's more than 30 years, isn't it, Brian? I'm not sure.
I don't believe it. I think we're creeping up on 30.
Okay, well,
I have to go check my Avi clock. It's
okay. Well, being as old as we are probably are creeping. So that makes good sense. But I originally met Brian when he was a student at Brown University and Rhode Island School of Design. I was living in Providence. But I had written a book, and it came about because I was browsing in a bookstore in the cheap books. That's where I buy books, Michaela. Not the fancy, expensive ones, but I go to the cheap book. And I stumbled across a book that was, I don't even know what it is. I'm embarrassed to say I don't have the title and the author, but this was about a guy who was, I think he was a forest ranger, and he found a baby owl that had fallen out of its nest, and he restored it to health, and he described in a really fascinating book. And the book was full of owl lore, so that I decided that I would write a book about an owl, and that book would become Poppy. And for those who have read it, it begins with the owl, but then I got intrigued by what the owl ate, and that was mice, and hence Poppy came into being. I wrote the book, and I delivered it to my editor, Richard Jackson, at Orchard Books at the time. And I said, I'd like to have an illustrator. Now, I had worked with Brian on an earlier book, a graphic novel, believe it or not, one of the very early ones. And well, you have a copy of it.
I was going to say, do you have one? Wow, show and tell.
Show
and tell. City of Light, City of Dark.
City of Dark. And we like to think it was the first graphic novel for young people, but I don't know if that's true. Just forget about all those other comic books and stuff. Anyway, so I suggested to the editor that we illustrate Poppy, and he said, who? And I suggested Brian. And I guess they agreed. And then Brian took over the project and he did the first book. Now, what happened, it's a very complicated story, but the Poppy books, in essence, went to a different publisher. And that's when there was a discussion about writing a sequel and so forth. So while it is a series, and it is now a series of 7 books, the first book in the series is now number 3. I wrote 4, and then I wrote 1, and then I wrote 5, 6, and now 7, which is now the second in the series. The trick was to make it all seem as if it flowed from 1 to 7, and I like to think we have. But anyway, the whole series was created over a period of 25 years, and we are now going to forget that fact and think of the series as a unified series that flows effortlessly from the first book, Ragweed, to the last book, which is Poppy and Aerith. Is that correct, Brian, the last one? Poppy and
last for now, I think.
Oh, you are we doing another one? Are we about to announce this on this? Yeah, that's
no announcement. No announcements.
It's news to me. Okay. Well, if you can, maybe you write the book and I'll do the pictures this time. How about that? I don't think it'd be. Well, you're a good writer. I'm not a good artist.
Don't know about that.
Okay.
Speaking about Brian's work on the book, I hear that you have some pictures that you want to show us.
I would love to show you what the process of illustrating a Poppy book is like, and we will start with the first one. I need the power of screen sharing to be.
Let me give you the power of screen sharing. You should have it.
I have the power.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Great. So, oh, look, here is your.
Well, this is where I live.
Yeah.
Is that your writing oasis, Avi?
That's where I live permanently. That's the house I'm sitting in right now.
Wow.
9,000 feet up.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
All right. Back to sea level.
Okay.
So this was what Poppy looked like when I first received it from our editor, Dick Jackson. It was the manuscript straight off of Avi's word processor. And I think when one of the funny things about this book was that when I was offered the job as an illustrator, it wasn't because there was some specific style of work that I had that we thought would really fit the book. But Avi and Dick Jackson and I think had worked together well on City of Light, City of Dark. And so we were just willing to get back together and kind of see what happened. So when I started the drawings for Poppy, everything was really wide open. And these are some of the early character sketches. These are some of the first sketches I did for the book. And at that point, as an illustrator, what you're doing is going through the book and doing really just kind of a form of note-taking, of looking for moments in the book that feel essential, that feel important, that feel very visual, that feel like something the reader is going to want or need to see. So it starts off very loose, it's very exploratory. I don't even really have a look for the characters developed. These are some of the first character sketches I did for Poppy, which as you can see, are pen and ink and line with a wash. They're very rough. They're pretty cartoony. I sent these. I don't know if you ever saw these, Avi. I sent these to
Did.
Dick, I'm sure, though.
I have seen them.
Yeah, and he felt they were too cartoony. And you know, one of the things you want to do as an illustrator is bring your own something of your own sensibility to the book, but you also want to respect the author's sensibility and you want to be in sympathy with the tone of the book. And these felt, you know, I think these felt a little too cartoony to all of us. So then I made this drawing for Dick, which was a more, you know, sort of pastoral feel to it, a little more realistic. I did a version in pen and ink and a version in pencil. And I think when Dick saw the pencil version, this was the one he thought was closest to the feeling of the book. And I agreed with that. So, so doing more realistic drawings meant doing a little more research for me. So I went to the Natural History Museum I was living in Somerville, Massachusetts at the time. So I went to the Natural History Museum at Harvard, which then had the wonderful name of the Museum of Comparative Zoology. So I drew some of their stuffed animals. These were some of the wardrobe decisions that as illustrator was left to me to decide what Lungworth's thimble would look like. And I remember going to the Boston Public Library and finding a book on thimbles to look at. I mean, today this would be a Google image search, but I was in the thimble section at the library for this. This is an early sketch for a drawing of a boot in Poppy. This was a giant, really heavy pair of boots that my dad gave me when I left Texas to go to college in New England. So I could have gone to college at the North Pole with these boots. But
let me point out that there's a little sticker on there.
Yeah.
And I recognize Dick's handwriting, right?
That's right.
And
it says great. And you get a lot of stickers as an illustrator, and they don't always say great. So those are the ones you want to be sure to put in the slideshow.
But that's the editorial comment right there on that sheet. Yeah. He had a very distinctive handwriting.
So just to continue on with the research, you know, sometimes you go to museums to look for research. Sometimes you have the boots under the bed for your research. This was a drawing of a tree that I had done in Vermont in my sketchbook. And that was something I drew on, no pun intended, for this sketch, which becomes this final drawing in Poppy.
And this, so cool. And that illustration, go back to it. That's one of the best moments in the book, in which Poppy is feeling very small in this enormous forest, and she makes a statement about, it's right there at the top paragraph, and if I could ever distill my attitude about books for young people, that paragraph defines it precisely.
Mm-hmm. And the combination is magical. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Between that and the picture.
If you really like magical, then you'll like this. This is well, maybe it's not that magical. This was a few books ago. I wanted to work on my porcupine drawing. I wanted to sort of get Aerith up to the next level. So I visited the zoo, the Prospect Park Zoo here in Brooklyn, because I learned that they had a porcupine that they take out for a morning walk before they open the zoo. So I got permission from the zoo to show up before the zoo opened and take some pictures of their porcupine, which is a great deal of fun.
My jaw's on the floor. That's so cool.
We had a porcupine come up and visit us just the other day up here. So,
were your dogs okay?
Well, he probably wanted a copy of the book, the new book. So,
darn.
Probably wanted to know why he didn't have a larger part.
Right.
Yeah.
He has a cameo bit, but
this was the original painting for the original Poppy.
Cover
became the cover on the left. And then these are not actually in order, but these are 3 of the covers Poppy has had over the years. Wow. And this year it gets a new one. And as Avi said, it's now book 3 out of 7. So there we are. And let's see if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Oh, I see the
little button that'll do that for you.
Let me just point out something about this, that people often ask me that the books now seem to begin with Ragweed's story. And then suddenly in the 3rd book, Ragweed tragically dies. And this comes as a shock to lots of readers, young and old, that you're not supposed to kill off your main character. But the thing is that I like to remind people that it was Poppy that was written first.
Mm-hmm.
Ragweed was not that important a character. He serves a function, and that's why he doesn't last long. But in fact, Ragweed's spirit, I think, would you agree, Brian? It's pervasive in all of the books. I mean, he's referenced again and again and again. So his spirit, as it were, lives on and so forth. But so.
Well, congratulations to both of you. It's quite an amazing accomplishment to have this book series after so long, and the continuation and being able to bring it to new readers. And so what do you hope that new readers to this series get out of it?
Fun.
Fun?
Fun. It's just, I like to think, there's an old writer's gag which will tell you how old I am. I think it was S.J. Perlman, a comic writer of years ago, who said, if you want to send a message, call Western Union. Now, most people don't know Western Union is anymore. Anyway, these books are just, I think they're just fun. And the characters, as a writer, sometimes you get lucky and you invent characters which are very real and meaningful to the writer. So they become important, and by becoming important, they become real to the reader. Mm-hmm. And it's not an accident. I mean, one of the things that has helped me do that is, curiously enough, is Brian's illustrations, because when I think of my characters, I think of what Brian has drawn. And that gives me an instant fingerhold, I should say, because I write with my fingers, not my toes, but a sense of who they are and what they are. And I love writing about them. And when a writer likes the characters he or she is writing about, I think it communicates to the writers. So these are characters that are fun to write about. They have adventures that are fun. And if people laugh with Aerith, or they run around with joy like Poppy does because she loves to dance, I think that's just all we want. I speak for myself, but I bet I speak for Brian as well.
But I think you're being a little modest. I mean, I think they are very fun books, but I think there's a level of characterization to the characters that adds some depth and some ballast to that. And I think they're substantial characterizations, and the characters go through, they go through real life stuff while they're having fun. Their relationships with each other, how they define themselves, how they define their roles in the world, which makes them sound terribly dull, but I mean, they are primarily fun, but they're fun, while there's some ballast to it that makes it more than just something throwaway books.
Of all of these 7 books, Brian, do you have a favorite one?
He's gonna hold up all of them. How about for you, Avi? Do you have one?
Well, I think the funniest one is Aerith's birthday, I think. But I like to think that all of the books have funny moments. Different readers tell me they have different favorites all the time.
No, I'm trying not to say Poppy because I think that's the obvious one for me, but I'm just going to go for it, Poppy. I mean, it was my introduction to the characters. It was,
Okay.
and I can't sort of separate my reading experience from that. And it's my introduction to Dimwood Forest, and Akax is such a great villain, and it's such a satisfying resolution, and such a important. Everything Poppy goes through in the book is exciting and adventurous and important to her.
What was
Okay.
the most challenging for each of you out of the 7?
Obviously, the last one. Well, I mean, the problem was there was a particular problem in writing this book for me. The story of Poppy is how she moves from a rather timid creature to a rather brave creature.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am writing about her before she goes through this change. But I didn't want to write about her as a sort of wispy, weak character. So I had to go step back and figure out how to tell her story, which gives her certain strengths, but still leave room for development when it comes to Poppy. So I created a predicament that she's simply battling for her life, and she's capable of taking care of herself, which is part of the story. But I didn't want to go that far so that Poppy didn't make any sense. So
Right.
that was a particular puzzle for me as a writer in the book.
How about
So
for you, Brian?
Well, what's difficult for me in book 7 is that she's battling for her life because she's trapped in a cage. I happen to have one of these cages here, which Avi sent me. So
Oh,
there's no process that we have whereby Avi sort of clears with me how difficult something is going to be to draw before he puts it in the book. So
it's a simple device. It's just squares.
just squares, he says.
Yes.
But speaking of that, what is the collaboration process between the two of you like? Brian, obviously in your slideshow, you showed us a note from Richard, your editor, but what about between the two of you?
Well, we do. I don't know how other writers, novelists, and illustrators work. In publishing, editors do not want writers to talk to the artist. I know that sounds strange, but that's a common practice. We have ignored that from the beginning. Brian has always gotten the manuscript before my editors. And Brian is a good writer, and has made innumerable suggestions in terms of the story and the text, pointed out some inconsistencies, problems, stupidities, all of which I absorb with grace and dignity, and then do the rewriting. And then from time to time, I get to see the artwork early too, and have made suggestions and so forth. And my favorite one is, which book is it? I guess it's in Ragweed, that Ragweed finds himself in a bottle of soda, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
Brian's father manages or owns, I don't know what his relationship is, the Dr. Pepper plant down in Texas. And I suggested
a Dr. Pepper.
Okay. And I suggested that the bottle of soda be labeled Dr. Pepper. I mean, shameless
Plugging, yeah.
pushing, So, and then in the current book, there's a scene in which a real estate guy is reading a newspaper. And we had serious discussions, there we go, serious discussions about what's the name of the newspaper, what's the headline, the headline. And these were deep philosophic discussions about these kinds of things. So we have fun.
It got pretty dark for a minute there. We pulled back though.
And then again, talk about putting surreptitiously products. If you look at that picture very carefully, there's a cup, a coffee cup. And Brian, who went to Brown University, very faintly stuck on the logo of Brown University. I mean, this is a form of recruitment that's really very subtle.
I just thought being a real estate agent in Amperville was an interesting place for him to end up. So
that's it.
It was a very subtle thing. And now it's been, I mean, nobody was even meant to notice it, and now it's going to live forever on YouTube.
You know, and that shows you what an education from Brown can get you. I mean,
I love hearing about those Easter eggs.
They're hiring in Amperville.
And then if you look at the very last picture in the book, Brian has drawn a poppy, the actual flower, and then a ragweed. And then in the distance, in the far distance, there's Mr. Okax coming closer. I mean, this is serious morality and so forth. Oh,
I have an advanced reader copy, so mine is not yet defined, but that's awesome.
Okay. Brian, open up that book again, just where you had. There's something that's fun. What happens in the book, there's a song that the mice sing.
Yes. Okay.
My son, my oldest son, is a musician. So I asked him to write some music. And the publisher was willing to put the music in the book. And then I asked my son to make a recording of the song. So he, with his family, recorded the mouse song. And if you go to the internet sign in for that, you can hear this song being sung. And my dream is that if we ever get back into schools, Brian, we will be met by great choruses of kids singing the mouse song as we enter. How about that?
I was afraid you were going to have us singing it as we entered.
No. We're not going
unpleasant for everyone.
No, we're not going to do that. We're going to let the kids do it, right?
Good. Well, let the kids do the work.
Before our guests break into song, we're going to move to a Q&A portion. So any of you listening or watching right now, feel free to type out in the chat. Some of you have been active already, talking about the rearranging of the series. And if you have any questions for either Avi, Brian, or both, feel free to type them out in the comments below. Someone does want to know, what advice do you have for young illustrators and young writers?
From a writing point of view, there's only one piece of advice I can give you, and that's read, read, and read some more. And when you get that reading done, read, read, and read some more. And then read, read, and read some more, and you'll be a better writer. Brian, your turn. Advice.
I have parallel advice. Draw a lot. Look at other drawings. Try to think actively about what you like about other artists. It's always an interesting exercise to actually copy someone else's art, and that's fine. Also try to figure out what you can bring to your drawing that's unique to you. Like that ultimately, I think when you're starting off as an artist and you're trying to learn how to draw, often it can be the case that the parts of the drawings that are really specific to you sometimes feel like the weakest parts, because they're not ways of drawing that you've seen anywhere else. And we're all sort of trained to accept what we've already seen as the way things should be. But that ultimately is what you have to bring to the drawings and to the work, and to bring, in a professional sense, to bring to art directors, on a personal sense, to bring to your work. So. Look and draw.
The chief advice I give, aside from reading to young writers, is I have a motto that I believe in, and that is, writers don't write writing, they write reading. Writers don't write writing, they write reading. And when you write, you're always writing for a reader. And that's what you want, and that's what you need to think about. Do they understand it? Will they cry when you want them to cry? Will they laugh when you want them to laugh? It's all for the reader.
I love hearing that. Both of those are excellent pieces of advice. And Brian, someone would like to know, what is your favorite medium to draw in, to paint in? What, do you have a favorite or a preference?
Well, the Poppy books are pencil, which I really enjoyed getting back to, because I've been working in picture books mostly with pen and ink and watercolor, which I enjoy a lot. And so getting back to just the straight pencil drawings there's a little bit of like putting on a garment I hadn't worn in a while. Wait, and I had to show you. Yes.
That's what's fun about all these Zoom visits, is we get such great show and tells.
This is how the pencils start off. And then this is how they end up. My friend Sergio Ruzzier introduced me to these devices which you can use to hold pencils and get that little extra bit of life out of a pencil. So
wow, that's great.
I have a collection of these from Ragweed and Poppy. So
tools of the trade. I love it. And so something else that people want to know are, what are you reading right now during quarantine, during COVID, or what books are you enjoying?
I just started to read the book, what's it called? It's about wolves. I forget the title. I am reading it. And I've written about wolves, and I find them quite fascinating. And I'm reading about wolves. I don't know why. Brian and I did a book about it. It's called Old Wolf, and he did the illustrations for that too. So, but they still fascinate me, and they've now come back into Colorado. So,
yeah, not
to Denver maybe, but up here they are.
What about you, Brian? What media are you consuming right now?
It's a newspaper, but let's not go into that. I'm taking Italian lessons, so I'm reading, one page of an Italian novel every 2 days.
That's cool.
That is really cool.
You're getting ready for the Venice book. I can see that.
Avi was teasing us earlier. Brian's learning Italian. There's a theme happening. Is Poppy going to Italy? That's what I'm hearing.
Poppy goes to Italy. That's a great title. I like that.
Thank you. She'd have the best food there.
Poppy takes a tax-deductible trip.
That's awesome. How many books have you guys worked on together? Do you know offhand?
Yes.
Do you?
There's the 7 Poppy books.
Yeah.
City of Light, City of Dark.
Yeah.
And then Mayor of Central Park.
Yeah.
And then you did, for a newspaper serialization, The Secret School.
Right. And Old Wolf, we already mentioned.
And Old Wolf, okay.
That's 12.
Well, that's enough.
Baker's dozen?
A baker's dozen, that's it. No, baker's dozen is
13.
13. It means we have to do another one.
So also, people would love to know where you get your ideas from. That's a popular question of how do ideas and inspiration strike the both of you?
From my perspective, let's see if I can explain it. I think because I read so much, and I've always read from a very early age, at a certain point, if you're lucky, you begin to think like a writer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. In other words, you begin to think in sentences and paragraphs, and it's not so much that I get ideas. I now look upon the world as full of ideas. My problem as a writer is I have too many ideas, and that's because I think in terms of a story. That's the way it works for me.
How about for you, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you train yourself to see the potential for ideas in things around you and things that you read. And you know, and there's a very, to be very practical about it, at a certain point, it becomes your job, you know, and you get in the habit of, you know, okay, I need to find something that is going to interest me and that I'm going to be excited about for this next project. And you know, and getting ideas doesn't mean, when you get an idea, I think one of the misconceptions some people might have, or I shouldn't even preface with that, but I'll just say, when you get an idea, that doesn't mean you have the whole book figured out. That's not the idea. The idea is, oh, I'm curious about this and I wonder what it would be like to work with this for a while and see what I could develop with it. And you know, most of those things you start to develop don't become anything. But if 1 out of 10 does, then you're in good shape. You've got a book.
Well, you know, people often talk about inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And what they mean, it's almost like the finger of God coming down and touching your head. But in fact, the word inspiration really means to put life into something. And so when you get an idea, it's only an idea. And the artist, whether you're a visual artist or a word artist, such as I like to think of myself, getting the idea is easy. It's putting life into the idea that becomes the difficult part.
It's sticking with it when it seems like it's not going to work, or it becomes something naughty and not.
Oh, you've noticed that. That happens
to
to you too? It happens to you?
I've just heard about it happening to other people, so I thought
How do you overcome writer's block or artist block? Do you guys have tricks of the trade that you can share?
Writer's block, people mean two things. It means two things. Writer's block is a serious mental illness. You become frightened of what you're writing. I'm lucky enough to know that's never happened to me. But if what you mean by writer's block is, oh, what's the next line? That happens to me 70 times a day. And most of writing, I can say, is thinking. What am I doing? What's next? Did I just say that 5 times in the last page? Have I used this word too many times? It's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. And so writer's block, if you want to call it that, is simply part of the process.
I'm working on a draft of a picture book now, and it wants to be a very simple book, and it wants a very simple ending, but I keep taking it apart and putting it back together because it needs to be simple, but it also needs to you know, land the book on its feet in a certain way. It needs to justify everything that came before it and make it feel like the natural conclusion and a rewarding conclusion for the reader. And so you know, hopefully in the end it will look like it was no work at all, but that won't be true.
You know, I once tried to figure out how many times I rewrite a book of mine, and I figured out it was about 80 times. So,
Wow.
you know, so that's just simply the way it works, over and over and over again. And I get up, I lie in bed in the morning, I wake up, my eyes open up, and I'm thinking, where was I? What am I working on today? And that's the way it works.
And so if you guys are constantly working, can you tease us a little bit about what you're working on next? I know obviously you didn't say that there was going to be an 8th Poppy book necessarily, but what are you working on now?
Well, Brian, you said you're working on a picture book. You want to tell about that?
If you can, no publisher rules.
Wait until I get this ending figured out, then I'll tell you.
I'm working on 2 or 3 books, sort of. I mentioned I'm working on a book about Venice, part of a series of books that I've done with Scholastic. And I'm also working on a book that deals with the American Revolution. And then I just agreed to do another book for another publisher. I have enough work. at the present time, I've assured myself that I'm going to live at least 100 years old. Otherwise, I'm going to default on the contracts I've signed. So that's
Then you'll
not
be
good.
in trouble.
I will. I mean, think of my expenses my widow will incur if I don't get these books done. So.
Well, you mentioned Venice and American Revolution, Avi, and Brian shared with us a little bit of his research process. What does your research process look like?
Well, work on a Venice book. I lived in Venice for a period of time. So does that count? Yeah. I went back to Venice. I read about Venice. I look at pictures about Venice. I watched movies about Venice. The only thing I have not done is study Italian. But Brian will come along as my translator next time I go. So.
Yes, Brian.
Avi, can you tell them about can you tell our audience about the dictionary of historical synonyms that you use? Am I getting that right?
Well, on my computer is the Oxford Unabridged Dictionary. And one of the elements that it has an historical thesaurus. Okay, we know what a thesaurus is, right?
Right.
Okay, so just today I was writing this book about the American Revolution, and somebody refers to somebody as his boss. So I quickly flipped on the Oxford to see if the word boss, as that is to say somebody who you work for, existed in the 18th century. Turns out it comes into the English language in the 16th century. So I was free to use that in this book about that. So I do that a lot. And I love to find words that I can use when I'm writing a historical work that sort of gives some interesting twist to the language and gives it some color. I love doing that.
Well, that's so great to hear. I can't thank you both enough for your honesty, for your for the stories that you've gifted us and the art that you've given us for all these years, and the fact that it's going to be 25 years now of this series coming out, and young readers will get the full, complete experience. I'm envious of them, and thank you both enough for this interview and for your stories, and we really appreciate you coming along today. If you want to just take a moment and tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, if they want to learn more about you and about your other works. Brian, do you want to start?
I'm at brianfloca.com.
There you go. That works.
And I'm at
and thank you.
Oh,
I'm at avi-writer.com. So anyway, it's good to see you, Michaela. Good to see you, Brian. We don't get to see each other.
Avi. I know. This is nice. We should do this more often.
Well, we'll take you both back anytime. And you guys can get Ragweed and Poppy, as well as the rest of the books at tattercover.com. It's definitely just so worth it, no matter what the age that you are. I highly recommend this. And thank you guys again for joining us. Once again, our bookstores are open, so you can come in and say hi, or you can always order on tattercover.com. Both of you gentlemen, if you'll stay on while we just turn off the live button here. But thank you all again for joining us, and we hope you stay safe, wash your hands, and happy reading.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
And we're